Have you ever, like, started a new eating protocol, right?
Hmm.
You cut your carbs or maybe you dropped your calories and you step on the scale and you've lost, I don't know, 3 or 4 kilos in the first week.
Right, the classic honeymoon phase.
Exactly, the honeymoon phase. And you feel this incredible surge of motivation. You're thinking, okay, I am a genius. I have finally cracked the code to my own biology.
And then week 3 hits.
Week 3 hits, and the scale just completely stops moving. I mean, it hits a brick wall. And you haven't changed your behavior, right? You're still eating the exact same way, but the numbers refuse to budge.
Yeah, and the frustration there is just, it's palpable.
It's maddening. You assume your metabolism is just, I don't know, fundamentally broken,
Yeah,
and so you just abandon the whole effort. It's such an incredibly common cycle.
it really is. I mean, it's pretty much the defining frustration of modern nutrition, honestly.
Yeah.
And the reason that cycle is so universal is that we operate under this fundamental misunderstanding of what our bodies are actually doing when we alter our energy intake.
Right.
Like, we treat the bathroom scale as this omniscient judge of fat loss. We just assume it's measuring one single homogeneous thing.
Just fat, we assume it's just measuring fat.
Exactly. But the biological reality is vastly more complicated. And frankly, it's a lot more interesting than that.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because today we are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating text. It's an excerpt from a book chapter titled The Three Storehouses.
Or Los Tres Almacenes in its original Spanish.
Yes, exactly. And our mission today is to decode this biological mystery of why that stall happens, like why the scale is essentially an unreliable narrator, and how our bodies actually manage and store the energy we consume.
Right, and I love the stated goal of the text here. It says the goal is comprehension, not obsession.
Comprehension, not obsession. I love that too. It's really about giving you, the listener, the mental model to just understand your own physiology.
Yeah, because the core thesis we need to examine here is that the human body does not possess, like, one giant generalized dumping ground for excess calories.
It's not just one big bucket.
No, not at all. Instead, it uses 3 entirely distinct storehouses. And each of those storehouses operates under its own specific set of biological rules.
So different rules for different storage units.
Right. They operate on completely different time frames, and they're controlled by entirely different hormonal triggers.
Okay, we should probably unpack the underlying philosophy of energy first, because I think most of us intuitively treat energy as this really simple physics equation. Right?
Yeah, calories in, calories out.
Exactly. You consume energy, you burn energy, you store what's left. And we all know the laws of thermodynamics apply to humans, just like a combustion engine.
Sure.
Like, a chocolate croissant fundamentally holds, what, about 4 times the combustible energy of a piece of plain tomato toast?
Roughly, yeah.
So the body isn't some magic incinerator that can just, vanish those extra croissant calories into thin air.
No, and the laws of physics are absolute.
Yeah.
The text emphasizes this baseline reality immediately. You don't necessarily have to become a neurotic accountant of your own meals, right?
Right.
Like, you don't have to pull out an app and agonize over whether a salad dressing pushed your lunch to exactly 437 calories.
Because that just leads to burnout.
Absolutely. It totally leads to
Sure.
burnout. But at the same time, you can't escape the fundamental reality of the energy density of the food you're eating.
Yeah.
The body accounts for every single calorie that crosses your lips. It uses that energy to maintain your basal metabolic functions to power your movement to repair tissue.
And whatever is left over.
Whatever's not utilized in those processes, it must be stored. There's no getting around that.
Well, wait, here's the fundamental contradiction that drives people crazy, and it's something I think we really need to reconcile right now.
Okay, let's hear it.
If it is purely just physics, if it's simply a math equation of energy in versus energy out, shouldn't the rate of weight loss logically be this smooth, predictable, downward diagonal line?
You would think so, yeah.
Right. Like, if I consistently eat fewer calories than I burn, the graph should just look like a gentle slope.
Yeah, a nice steady decline.
Instead, for almost everyone, it looks like a cliff drop followed by a solid brick wall. So why does our biology seem to completely violate the physics of energy balance in that very first week?
Because that cliff drop is exactly the biological illusion the text warns about.
An illusion.
Yes. When you step on the scale after 7 days of a new diet and you see this massive sudden decrease, you are experiencing a physiological mirage.
Wow. Okay, but I feel so real.
Of course it does. It's incredibly validating. It feels like a monumental victory of discipline. But it's actually just a misinterpretation of which specific storehouse the body has decided to empty first.
So all that celebration in week one is essentially celebrating the wrong physiological mechanism.
Exactly.
We think we're burning through our long-term fat reserves, but we're actually just draining something much more superficial.
Right. And the text points to Storehouse number 1 for this, which it calls the emergency ATM.
The emergency ATM. Okay, so anyone who has looked into sports nutrition or, follows endurance athletics probably knows the scientific term for this.
Glycogen.
Right, glycogen. And we know glycogen is basically the way the body packages up excess glucose into stable chains for later use.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But what the text really zeroes in on here is the physical storage mechanics of those chains, right?
Yeah, to understand the mechanics, you really have to look at how the body handles glucose in the blood.
Okay, walk me through that.
So, after you eat carbohydrates, they're broken down into glucose molecules.
Right.
Now, keeping too much loose glucose floating around in the bloodstream is actually highly toxic.
Toxic. Really?
Yeah, over time, high blood sugar causes severe damage to blood vessels and nerves.
Oh, right, like with diabetes complications.
Precisely. So the body needs to clear it out rapidly. It takes those loose glucose molecules and links them together into these highly branched tree-like structures.
And that's the glycogen.
That is glycogen. It's just a brilliant way to store fuel safely without damaging the circulatory system.
Now, the text notes that we split this glycogen stash between two very different locations, and they act like two entirely different kinds of accounts.
Yeah, they have very different roles.
So the liver holds about 100 grams, and the skeletal muscles hold about 400 grams. If we look at the liver first, it seems to act like the communal systemic bank account for the whole body, right?
That's exactly it.
Yeah.
The liver stash is relatively small. I mean, 100 grams isn't much.
No, it's not.
But its function is absolute systemic survival. Its primary role is to maintain the homeostasis of your blood sugar between meals.
To keep it stable.
Right. Because the human brain is an incredibly energy-demanding organ. And under normal circumstances, it relies almost exclusively on a steady stream of glucose to function.
Right, the brain is a glucose hog.
It is. So if you haven't eaten for, say, 4 or 5 hours, your blood sugar begins to drop.
And the liver steps in.
Exactly. The liver senses this, snips a few glucose molecules off the ends of its stored glycogen branches, and releases them directly into the bloodstream.
Just to keep things running.
Yeah, it's a slow, controlled drip designed to keep your brain fully powered and your central nervous system stable until your next meal.
Okay, so if the liver is like the centralized municipal power grid keeping the city lights on, the muscle glycogen seems to act more like local emergency fire extinguishers.
I like that analogy.
Right, just placed in individual rooms. Because the text emphasizes that muscles are incredibly selfish with their stored energy.
They are entirely selfish. They absolutely will not share.
Why is that?
Well, muscle tissue actually lacks the specific enzyme required to release glucose back into the general bloodstream.
Oh, wow, so once it's in, it's trapped.
Once glucose is stored as glycogen inside a bicep or a quadricep, it is trapped there forever. It can only be utilized by that specific muscle for its own mechanical contraction.
So my bicep can't donate energy to my hamstring.
Nope, not a chance. And this is an evolutionary survival mechanism.
How so?
Think about it. If you're suddenly chased by a predator or you need to lift something incredibly heavy to save your own life, your leg or arm muscles cannot afford to wait for the liver to process and ship fuel through the circulatory system.
Oh, that makes total sense. That would take too long.
Right. They need explosive energy available in fractions of a second, so they keep a local stash of about 400 grams ready to go at a moment's notice.
Okay, let's tally that up. We've got 100 grams in the systemic liver account and 400 grams scattered across the local muscle accounts.
Yeah.
So we are looking at roughly 500 grams of total glycogen capacity in an average adult. Maybe a bit more if someone carries a significant amount of muscle mass.
Sure, maybe a little more for athletes.
The energy equivalent of that is roughly 2,000 calories.
Which is an incredibly small reserve when you really think about it.
It is. It's basically one day of food.
Barely that. It's barely enough energy to cover the basal metabolic rate of an average person for a single day of total bed rest. It's a very limited, very temporary pantry.
And here is where the text introduces the crucial math that explains that whole illusion of the first week of dieting we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, yes. The water weight.
Right. Because the nuance isn't the 2,000 calories of energy itself, it's the molecular properties of the glycogen structure. The text says glycogen is fiercely hydrophilic.
Yes. Hydrophilic meaning water-loving.
Okay, break that down for us.
So the structure of a glycogen molecule contains multiple hydroxyl groups. In chemistry, those hydroxyl groups naturally form hydrogen bonds with water molecules.
So they act like magnets for water.
Exactly. Glycogen does not, and physically cannot, sit inside your cells in a dry state. It pulls water into the tissue along with it.
How much water are we talking about here?
The generally accepted physiological ratio is that for every single gram of glycogen you store, your body is forced to store roughly 3 grams of water alongside it.
3 grams, just to maintain the cellular pressure.
Yes, to maintain cellular osmotic pressure.
Okay, let's follow the math on that because this completely exposes the trick the scale plays on us.
Let's do it.
If an average person is holding 500 grams of stored glycogen in their liver and muscles, and we multiply that by 3, they are also holding 1,500 grams of bound water.
Correct.
That means the total physical mass of this fully stocked energy pantry is 2,000 grams. That is exactly 2 kilos of weight just sitting there in the tissue.
2 kilos, yep.
So what happens when someone goes on a diet?
Well, when a person adopts a calorie deficit, particularly if they're restricting carbohydrates, their body rapidly burns through that small 2,000-calorie glycogen pantry.
Because it's the easiest fuel to grab.
Exactly. It's the emergency ATM.
Yeah.
And as those glycogen branches are broken down and used for energy, the osmotic pressure drops.
And the water.
The 1,500 grams of water that were chemically bound to the glycogen suddenly have nothing to bind to. So the body simply filters that excess water through the kidneys and eliminates it as urine.
So to use an analogy, our muscles and liver aren't just a pantry, they are a soaking wet sponge.
They're a very heavy wet sponge.
Yeah. When we start a restrictive diet, we aren't burning through deep tissue fat. We're just wringing out the sponge.
That is exactly what you were doing.
We step on the scale after 7 days, we see we are 2 or 3 kilos lighter, and we assume we've somehow melted away 3 kilos of pure body fat.
And unfortunately, the amount of actual adipose tissue, the fat oxidized in that first week, is usually just a fraction of a kilo.
A fraction?
Yeah. The dramatic, highly motivating plunge on the scale is almost entirely glycogen depletion and the associated water shedding.
Which sets up an incredibly cruel psychological trap.
It's devastating for people.
Because by week 3, the sponge is completely wrung out. The glycogen pantry is empty. The initial rush of water weight is gone.
Right.
Now, the body has no choice but to transition to harder to access fuel sources to make up the energy deficit. The rapid weight loss violently halts, and the scale does not move for days or even weeks.
And the psychological impact of that stall cannot be overstated.
No, it ruins people.
A person who doesn't understand this mechanism will assume their metabolism has crashed, or that their body has somehow adapted to the lower calories in a way that prevents further weight loss.
They feel broken.
They feel they're doing all the work for none of the reward they got in week 1.
And the trap snaps fully shut when they eventually give up out of frustration. Because the moment they abandon the diet and return to their baseline eating habits, which usually involves reintroducing carbohydrates, what happens?
The body reacts to that influx of carbohydrates by immediately prioritizing the restocking of the emergency pantry.
It fills the ATM back up.
Yes, it synthesizes new glycogen to refill the liver and the muscles. And because the biochemistry remains absolute, as those 500 grams of glycogen return, they chemically pull 1,500 grams of water right back into the tissue with them.
So the sponge soaks up the water almost overnight.
Overnight. Within 72 hours, those initial 2 or 3 kilos return to the scale.
And the person sees this rapid weight gain, despite only being off the diet for, a few days, and they assume they have suffered a massive, permanent failure.
Right. They internalize the belief that their body is uniquely defective, that they are destined to fail, and that weight loss is biologically impossible for them.
When in reality, they're witnessing a perfectly functioning biological machine executing its survival programming flawlessly.
Exactly. Refilling an empty energy reservoir with highly efficient fuel and necessary hydration is exactly what a healthy body should do after a period of deprivation.
But the tragedy is that this normal physiological function is interpreted as a moral or personal failure simply because of a misunderstanding of what a bathroom scale is actually measuring.
Which is why the comprehension, not obsession mantra of the text is so vital.
It really is.
If you fundamentally understand that the scale is heavily influenced by hydration and glycogen shifting, it loses its emotional power over you.
But this brings up the most critical question. If Storehouse number 1 is just a small, waterlogged pantry holding barely 2,000 calories of emergency fuel, and it's completely inadequate for long-term survival, where does the body put the real excess?
Right.
Like if a person lives in a continuous calorie surplus for months or years, how does the body handle that massive influx of energy?
That requires us to move to storehouse number 2.
Okay, storehouse number 2.
The text refers to this as the long-term bank transfer. To understand how the body stores deep reserves of energy, we have to look at the unique cellular structure of adipose tissue, specifically the cells known as adipocytes.
Adipocytes. Okay, because if the glycogen pantry is entirely tied to water weight, that creates a massive vulnerability for the
A
body.
huge vulnerability.
You couldn't possibly store a month's worth of energy as glycogen because the associated water weight would make you too heavy to walk.
You'd weigh hundreds of kilos just in water.
So the body had to evolve a completely different water-free storage system to survive the famines of our evolutionary past.
And adipocytes are the evolutionary answer to that problem. These are highly specialized cells, and their primary function is to store energy in the form of lipid droplets.
Fat droplets.
Exactly. You can visualize an adipocyte as a microscopic, incredibly elastic balloon.
Okay, a balloon.
When the body has excess energy that exceeds the capacity of the glycogen pantry, it converts that energy into fatty acids and packs them into these cellular balloons as triglycerides.
And the balloon just stretches.
Yes, the adipocyte physically expands to accommodate the lipid droplet.
So wait, we aren't continuously growing new fat cells to store the energy, we're just inflating the ones we already have.
Basically,
Yeah.
yes. In an adult body, the total number of adipocytes remains relatively constant under normal conditions.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. Weight gain and weight loss are primarily driven by the hypertrophy, meaning the physical expansion and the shrinking of existing fat cells.
So they just blow up and deflate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the sheer storage capacity of this system is staggering when you break down the energy density.
The math the text provides on this is honestly humbling.
It is.
Let's walk through it. It says 1 single kilo of human fat tissue contains roughly 7,700 calories of combustible energy.
7,700. Yes.
If we apply that to a hypothetical, average person, say someone weighing 80 kilos with a body fat percentage of 25%, they're carrying 20 kilos of fat on their frame.
Right.
If we multiply 20 kilos by 7,700 calories, that equals 154,000 calories of stored energy.
154,000 calories.
It's mind-boggling.
To contextualize that number, an average adult requires somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 calories a day to maintain their basic life functions.
Right?
An internal reserve of 154,000 calories means that this hypothetical person has enough stored energy strapped to their body to survive for over 60 days without consuming a single piece of food.
2 whole months.
As long as they had access to water and essential electrolytes, their body could run entirely on its own internal battery for 2 months.
When you look at it through the lens of human history, it is an absolute biological superpower.
It is the reason we were here today.
Right. Because we evolved over millions of years in environments where caloric availability was wildly unpredictable.
Very unpredictable.
You might have access to a massive caloric surplus after a successful hunt, or maybe a late summer harvest. But you knew a brutal, months-long winter was approaching where food would be practically non-existent.
Yeah, the body had to develop a mechanism to bank the feast to survive the famine.
And adipose tissue is the ultimate expression of that biological imperative because lipids repel water, right? They're hydrophobic.
Yeah.
So the body can pack an astronomical amount of energy into a very small, very lightweight space. It is a masterpiece of efficiency.
It's a masterpiece.
But, and this is a big but, this introduces a massive contradiction that I think everyone who is ever trying to lose weight feels deeply.
The friction.
Yes. If I have 150,000 calories sitting right there in my adipose tissue, essentially an all-you-can-eat buffet of energy locked inside my own body, why is it so incredibly difficult to access it?
It's a great question.
Why does my body make me feel exhausted, lethargic, and aggressively hungry when I just skip lunch? Why doesn't the system just seamlessly tap into the vault and let me go about my day?
The answer lies in the friction of the mobilization process. The text uses the analogy of a bank transfer for a reason here.
Right, compared to the ATM.
Exactly. Glycogen is cash in an ATM.
Right.
You push a button, and the glucose is in your bloodstream in seconds. Accessing stored body fat is the biological equivalent of initiating an international wire transfer that requires, like, multiple layers of authorization, complex routing, and several days to clear.
Let's trace that pathway because understanding the complexity of this transfer completely changes how you view fat loss. It is not just melting away like wax.
No, it's highly complex. The biological process is called lipolysis.
Okay.
For your body to use a single calorie of stored fat, a highly complex sequence of events must occur. First, An enzyme inside the fat cell called hormone-sensitive lipase has to break the stored triglyceride apart into free fatty acids and a glycerol backbone.
It unpacks the box.
Right. Then, those free fatty acids must physically exit the adipocyte and enter the bloodstream. But because fat doesn't dissolve in water, and blood is mostly water, the fatty acids can't travel alone.
They just clog up, right? Like oil and water.
Exactly. They have to bind to a transport protein called albumin just to move through the circulatory system.
So we are loading the cargo onto shipping vessels just to navigate the bloodstream.
Precisely. The albumin carries the fatty acids to a tissue that needs energy, like, say, a working muscle. The fatty acid detaches, crosses the muscle cell membrane, but it still isn't usable energy yet.
Wait, there's more.
Oh, yeah. It then has to be actively transported inside the mitochondria, the cellular power plants,
Yeah.
using a specific shuttle molecule called carnitine.
Another shuttle.
Another shuttle.
Well,
And once inside the mitochondria, it undergoes a complex, multi-step chemical breakdown known as beta oxidation.
wow.
And only at the very end of this grueling biochemical journey does the cell finally produce ATP,
ATP.
adenosine triphosphate. That is the actual molecular currency that cells spend to perform work.
It is a massive logistical hurdle.
It really is.
If ATP is the actual dollar bill the cell spends to flex a muscle, the stored fat is like a gold bar sitting in a vault. You have to retrieve the gold, melt it down, transport it, mint the coins. The body is understandably reluctant to do all of that unless it absolutely has to.
Right. And here is the most critical variable in the entire system. The body possesses a master lock on that vault door,
A master lock.
and it absolutely refuses to initiate that complex logistical transfer if a specific hormone is elevated in the bloodstream.
We are talking about insulin.
Insulin. It is the ultimate traffic director of human metabolism.
Okay, explain how insulin acts as the lock.
When you consume a meal, particularly one containing carbohydrates, your blood glucose rises. The pancreas responds by secreting insulin.
Right.
Insulin's primary mandate is storage. It signals to the body, nutrients are abundant, the famine is over, put everything into storage mode.
Stored away.
Exactly. And from a biochemical standpoint, insulin forcefully inhibits that enzyme we talked about earlier, hormone-sensitive lipase.
Wait, so as long as insulin is elevated, the enzyme required to open the fat cell is literally deactivated?
It is deactivated. The vault is locked shut. The biological environment simply will not permit the burning of stored fat while insulin is actively trying to clear fresh glucose from the blood.
Which fundamentally explains why so many modern dieting approaches fail miserably.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if you adopt a diet where you are cutting your overall calories, but you are constantly grazing on small, carbohydrate-rich snacks every 2 hours,
Your insulin levels never have a chance to drop back to baseline.
you're continually keeping the vault locked.
Yes.
Your body is desperate for energy because of the calorie deficit, but it cannot legally access the 150,000 calories stored on your waistline.
And that hormonal state is exactly what creates the lethargy and intense hunger of a failed diet.
Because your body thinks it's starving.
Your cells are signaling an energy crisis.
Yeah.
But the insulin is preventing the release of stored fat. So you feel cold, your cognitive function dips, and your drive to eat becomes overwhelmingly powerful.
Your body is basically screaming at you to find food.
Exactly. To successfully lose fat, you don't just need a caloric deficit. You must curate periods of time where insulin drops low enough to unlock the adipocytes and allow lipolysis to occur.
That is such a vital distinction. Now, the text introduces another layer of nuance to Storehouse number 2 that is incredibly important from a health perspective.
Yes, the location of the fat.
Right. It points out that not all adipocytes are stored in the same way, and the physical location of the fat dictates how dangerous it is to your biology. It divides the vault into subcutaneous fat and visceral fat.
Let's start with subcutaneous fat.
Okay.
Subcutaneous fat is the adipose tissue located directly beneath the epidermal layers. It's the fat you can physically pinch with your fingers on your arms, your thighs, or your abdomen.
The pinchable fat.
Right. From a societal and aesthetic standpoint, subcutaneous fat is usually the primary focus of weight loss efforts. People look in the mirror, pinch the tissue, and they want it gone.
But biologically speaking, the text suggests that this pinchable fat is largely inert. It's essentially just a passive storage locker, right?
It is. Subcutaneous fat is remarkably safe from a metabolic perspective. In fact, possessing a healthy layer of subcutaneous fat is entirely normal and evolutionarily advantageous.
It keeps warm.
It provides thermal insulation against cold weather, it offers physical cushioning for bones and joints, and it serves as a secure, non-toxic holding area for excess energy. It does not actively interfere with the rest of your biological systems.
Okay, so if the pinchable fat is the safe, passive storage, visceral fat is the polar opposite.
Completely different beast.
The text paints a fairly grim picture of what this tissue does. Where is visceral fat located, and why is it so damaging?
Visceral fat is the adipose tissue that accumulates deep inside the abdominal cavity.
So behind the muscle.
Yes. You cannot pinch it. It physically wraps itself tightly around your internal organs, your liver, your stomach, your intestines, and your pancreas. It pushes the abdominal wall outward from the inside.
Wow, it sounds invasive, almost parasitic.
It acts very much like an invasive organ. The defining characteristic of visceral fat is that it is highly metabolically active. It does not just sit there passively holding calories.
What is it doing?
Visceral adipocytes actively synthesize and secrete a constant stream of inflammatory proteins called adipokines directly into the portal circulation, which leads straight to the liver.
So it is actively poisoning the local environment.
It creates a state of chronic, systemic, low-grade inflammation throughout the entire body.
And it's terrifying.
It is. The presence of excess visceral fat is the primary driver of insulin resistance, which directly leads to type 2 diabetes. It alters your lipid profiles, increasing the risk of cardiovascular disease. It's the core physical component of metabolic syndrome.
And a critical point to understand, and the text brings this up, is that a person can appear relatively slim on the outside.
Right.
Like they may have very little pinchable subcutaneous fat, but their internal organs could be suffocating in a deep layer of highly inflammatory visceral fat.
That is the classic skinny fat phenotype. A person might have a normal BMI, but their internal metabolic health is completely compromised.
However, the text offers a massive silver lining here.
Oh, yes. It's very encouraging.
It provides a biological reality that is incredibly encouraging for anyone who feels stuck on their health journey. What's the good news about visceral fat?
The biology of visceral fat contains an inherent vulnerability. Because it is so highly metabolically active, it is uniquely sensitive to the body's fat-mobilizing hormones, specifically catecholamines like adrenaline and noradrenaline.
Okay.
The visceral epicytes possess a higher density of the receptors that respond to these hormones.
Wait, so because it is so active, it is actually the first tissue to respond when you finally drop your insulin and create a deficit?
It is the very first to go. When you improve your diet, lower your baseline insulin, and begin exercising, the body preferentially targets the visceral fat deep within the abdomen before it ever bothers to mobilize the stubborn subcutaneous fat on your hips or thighs.
I want to draw on that for a second because the psychological implications are profound.
They really are.
Imagine you are 3 or 4 weeks into a dedicated health intervention. You are eating better, you are moving more, the initial water weight is gone so the scale isn't dropping. You look in the mirror and you can still pinch the exact same amount of subcutaneous fat on your stomach.
Right, you see no change.
The external feedback loop is telling you that you are failing, that your effort is yielding 0 results.
But the internal biochemical reality is a massive victory.
Yes.
During those exact weeks where the scale is completely stagnant and your reflection hasn't changed, your body is selectively hunting down and oxidizing the dangerous visceral fat.
It's cleaning house.
Exactly. The literal physical pressure on your liver and pancreas is diminishing. Your systemic inflammation is plummeting. Your cells are becoming more sensitive to insulin. You are drastically reducing your risk of a cardiac event or developing diabetes.
You are becoming objectively, measurably healthier at the cellular level.
You are.
That reframes the entire concept of a diet plateau. Wow. If you only use the bathroom scale or the mirror as your metrics of success, you will likely abandon the effort right at the exact moment. The most profound, life-saving physiological changes are occurring inside your abdominal cavity.
Which goes back to the motto, comprehension, not obsession.
Comprehension, not obsession. If you understand the biology, you can trust the process, even when the external metrics are silent.
Fat is incredibly slow to mobilize, but it is the safe, intended source of long-term energy. The body wants to utilize it. It just requires patience and the correct hormonal environment.
Which leads us to the darkest part of the text.
Ah, yes. Storehouse number 3.
There is a third storehouse. And from what the text outlines, this is a storehouse the body considers off-limits under normal circumstances. It only breaks into this vault when it believes the organism is facing imminent death.
Right. Storehouse number 3 is the skeletal muscle tissue itself.
Muscle.
Yes. Your body can, and under extreme duress will, cannibalize its own structural proteins to extract energy.
Now, obviously, We don't naturally think of our biceps or our hamstrings as fuel tanks, right?
No, of course not.
They are the mechanical engines that allow us to interact with the world. So, under what biological conditions does the body become so desperate that it starts dismantling its own engine to survive?
The trigger is almost always extreme negligence or a catastrophic environmental failure.
Like actual starvation.
Right. It happens during prolonged starvation where all other reserves are exhausted. But in the modern world, it most frequently occurs when people subject themselves to dangerously aggressive, extremely low-calorie crash diets.
Or when they attempt massive amounts of exhaustive physical exertion without providing any fuel to the system.
Exactly.
So let's walk through the exact mechanics of this crisis. Let's say someone goes on a radical, 800 calorie a day crash diet.
Okay.
They completely deplete their glycogen pantry in a few days. Their insulin is very low, so they're trying to access the fat vault. But perhaps the sheer volume of energy they are demanding simply exceeds the rate at which the bank transfer of lipolysis can occur.
That happens, yeah.
What forces the body to cross the line into destroying muscle?
The crisis almost universally originates with the central nervous system.
The brain.
As we established earlier, the human brain is an absolute energy glutton, and its default requirement is glucose.
Right.
Now, while the vast majority of your peripheral body, your heart, your organs, your resting muscles, can happily transition to running entirely on the free fatty acids released from the fat vault, those bulky fatty acids cannot cross the blood-brain barrier.
Ah, so the brain is locked behind a security gate, and fatty acids don't have the clearance badge.
That's a perfect analogy.
So the glycogen is gone, meaning no easy glucose. The fat vault is open, but the brain can't use the fat. How does the body solve the brain's energy crisis?
The body looks for alternative raw materials that it can chemically forcefully reconstruct into glucose.
Where does it get them?
The most abundant source of those raw materials is the amino acids that make up the structural proteins of your skeletal muscle.
Oh, man.
The body releases enzymes that begin to systematically break down muscle fibers into loose amino acids. Those amino acids are shipped through the blood to the liver.
And the liver performs a kind of metabolic alchemy.
It is a process called gluconeogenesis. Literally translated, the word means the creation of new glucose.
Creation of new glucose.
The liver takes those amino acids, strips away their nitrogen components, and forces the remaining carbon skeletons into new glucose molecules. It then pushes that newly synthesized glucose into the blood to keep the brain alive.
The text uses a very vivid analogy for this. It compares it to burning the wooden furniture in your living room to keep the house warm during a blizzard.
It's exactly like that.
It is a desperate measure. You will survive the night, but when the storm passes, you don't have a dining table or a couch.
Exactly.
But honestly, looking at the long-term metabolic cost of this process, it feels less like burning a couch and more like taking out a payday loan at a 500% interest rate to pay your mortgage.
That is a highly accurate way to frame it. You are borrowing against your future metabolic health to survive a temporary self-imposed crisis. The short-term survival mechanism guarantees a long-term catastrophe.
Break down the mechanics of that catastrophe, because I think this explains the tragedy of the yo-yo dieter.
Let's do it.
We all know people who have dieted aggressively, lost weight, regained it, and swear that it becomes biologically harder to lose weight every single time they try. Why does burning the furniture ruin the house?
It comes down to the concept of the basal metabolic rate, or BMR.
The engine idle speed.
Right. Your BMR is the total number of calories your body requires simply to exist at rest. The energy needed to keep your heart beating, your lungs expanding, and your cells functioning.
Okay.
Muscle tissue is incredibly metabolically expensive. It requires a significant amount of daily energy just to maintain its existence, far more than adipose tissue requires.
So simply possessing a larger amount of muscle mass naturally raises the baseline number of calories you burn every 24 hours. Your engine idles at a higher RPM.
Exactly. Now consider the physiology of the crash diet. A person starves themselves and successfully loses 10 kilos of scale weight.
Right.
But because they subjected their body to a gluconeogenic crisis, 3 or 4 of those lost kilos were not fat. They were muscle tissue cannibalized to feed the brain.
They successfully reduced their body mass, but they destroyed a massive portion of their metabolic engine in the process.
Exactly. So the diet ends, the person has reached their goal weight, they decide to return to what they consider a normal baseline of eating.
Right.
They consume the exact same number of calories they were eating before the diet started, assuming that since they are no longer in a deficit, they will simply maintain their new weight.
But the biological math has fundamentally changed.
The math has turned completely against them.
Yeah.
Because they burned away their metabolically active muscle tissue, their basal metabolic rate has plummeted.
Because there's less muscle to burn calories at rest.
Yes. The body literally requires fewer calories to survive today than it did 3 months ago. Therefore, the old normal baseline of food is now a massive, continuous calorie surplus.
This is the phenomenon of adaptive thermogenesis, but heavily exacerbated by the loss of lean mass.
Precisely.
The exact same meal that simply maintained their weight in January is now actively causing them to store fat in April.
The body is overwhelmed by the excess energy. It immediately begins locking that energy away in the fat vault. The scale weight piles back on with terrifying speed. This is the classic, devastating rebound effect.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. But the ultimate cruelty of the cycle is the composition of the regained weight. When the 10 kilos return, the body does not magically synthesize new muscle tissue to replace what was cannibalized.
Oh, no.
Without the specific stimulus of resistance training, all 10 regained kilos are stored entirely as body fat.
It is a horrific biological trade. You trade muscle for fat and permanently downgrade your metabolism.
You are now heavier than before, you possess less structural muscle, you carry more adipose tissue, and your daily caloric allowance is lower.
And the next time you attempt to lose weight, the mountain is infinitely steeper.
This is precisely why any intelligent nutritional intervention absolutely must prioritize the protection of lean tissue above all else.
That has to be the primary goal.
The goal is not simply to lose weight. The goal is to selectively mobilize stored body fat while vigorously defending the structural integrity of the muscle.
How does someone practically defend the furniture while still trying to empty the fat vault?
It requires a two-pronged approach to signal the body that the muscle is essential for survival. First, you must consume adequate dietary protein.
Okay, protein.
If you provide the body with an external source of amino acids through your diet, it has no biological incentive to aggressively tear down your muscle tissue to find them.
That makes sense. Give it the building blocks so it doesn't tear down the walls.
Right. Second, you must engage in progressive resistance training.
You have to physically prove to the nervous system that the muscle is necessary?
Exactly.
If you are lifting heavy things, the body concludes, we're in a stressful environment that requires immense physical strength. Under no circumstances can we dismantle the engine.
The physical stimulus of lifting weight actively halts the breakdown of muscle and signals the body to prioritize fat as the primary fuel source for the deficit.
All right, this is all coming together into a very clear mechanistic picture. We have defined the 3 individual storehouses. We have the fast, waterlogged emergency pantry, which is the glycogen.
Right.
We have the massive, slow-burning, long-term bank vault, which is the body fat. And we have the foundational structural material, the furniture, which is the muscle tissue.
Those are the 3.
The final piece of the puzzle is understanding how the body dynamically shifts between these 3 options. It isn't random. The text outlines a highly orchestrated chronological hierarchy of fuel utilization.
The text uses an excellent conceptual framework for this.
Yeah.
The descending staircase.
The descending staircase.
It organizes the body's metabolic priorities into a sequence of physiological steps. You descend from one step to the next, strictly based on the passage of time since your last ingestion of calories.
Let's walk down the staircase step by step, applying the biology we've discussed to a real-world scenario.
Sounds good.
Let's say it is 8 o'clock in the evening. I have just finished consuming a large dinner, maybe a substantial bowl of pasta. What is the metabolic reality at the very top of the stairs?
This is step 1, the fed state. Your digestive system is rapidly breaking down the pasta, and your portal vein is flooding the liver and the systemic circulation with a massive influx of fresh glucose.
And the immediate responses?
A sharp, pronounced spike in the secretion of insulin from the pancreas.
The ultimate traffic director has stepped into the center of the intersection and taken complete control of the system.
Exactly. Insulin issues a system-wide mandate, absolute storage mode. The first priority is to direct the fresh glucose into the peripheral cells to fuel whatever immediate metabolic processes are occurring.
Use what you need right now.
Right. But the excess must be managed quickly before it damages the blood vessels. So insulin checks the status of the emergency pantry. It drives the glucose into the liver and the muscle cells to top off the 2,000-calorie glycogen reserve.
And once the sponge is completely saturated, where does the remaining energy go?
Insulin directs the final overflow to the long-term vault. The remaining glucose is enzymatically converted into triglycerides and forcefully packed into the adipocytes.
The fat cells expand.
Yes, during step 1, your body is engaged purely in the processing and storage of newly introduced energy. The burning of stored body fat is completely and biochemically suspended.
Okay, we move to step 2. It is now 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm asleep. It has been 6 hours since the pasta dinner. The food has been completely digested and absorbed. What changes in the metabolic landscape?
You step down the staircase into the post-absorptive state.
Post-absorptive.
The external supply of energy has ceased. Consequently, the concentration of glucose in your bloodstream begins a slow, steady decline. As the glucose drops, the pancreas dramatically reduces its secretion of insulin.
The traffic director goes off duty, and when insulin fades, another hormone steps in to manage the decline, right?
Yes, the pancreas begins secreting a counter-regulatory hormone called glucagon.
Glucagon.
Glucagon essentially communicates the opposite message of insulin. It tells the body, the external supply is cut off. We must begin mobilizing internal reserves.
And how does the liver respond?
The liver responds to the glucagon by snipping glucose molecules off its stored glycogen branches and dripping them into the blood to keep the sleeping brain adequately fueled.
At the exact same time, because the insulin lock has been removed from the vault door, the fat cells finally get to participate.
Yes, the inhibition of hormone-sensitive lipase is lifted. The adipocytes begin breaking down triglycerides and releasing free fatty acids into the bloodstream.
And the body runs on those.
Your resting muscles and your internal organs happily absorb those fatty acids, pulling them into their mitochondria and oxidizing them for sustained energy while you sleep.
So in step 2, the body is running on a highly sophisticated hybrid engine. It is utilizing a slow drip of glycogen to fuel the brain and a steady stream of mobilized fat to fuel the peripheral tissues.
Exactly. It is a perfectly balanced state of internal energy management.
It's the biological ideal. But this state is entirely dependent on the remaining reserves of liver glycogen. Which brings us to step 3.
Step 3.
Let's push the scenario further. I wake up and I decide to skip breakfast and skip lunch. I engage in a prolonged fast, pushing past the 24-hour mark. Or perhaps I wake up and immediately run a grueling 2-hour marathon training session. We descend to step 3.
In either of those scenarios, the emergency pantry is completely exhausted. The liver's 100 grams of glycogen are gone, the water weight has been flushed out.
You are officially out of accessible glucose.
Out of glucose.
Which creates a massive physiological dilemma. We establish that the brain refuses to run on the bulky fatty acids currently pouring out of the fat vault. If there is absolutely no glucose left, how does the central nervous system survive? Step 3.
This is where human biology reveals one of its most incredible evolutionary adaptations.
Tell me.
The liver recognizes the crisis. Massive amounts of fatty acids are available, but the brain is starving. So the liver intercepts those free fatty acids and initiates a unique metabolic pathway called ketogenesis.
Ketogenesis.
It forcefully breaks the fatty acids down into smaller, highly efficient, water-soluble molecules known as ketone bodies, specifically beta-hydroxybutyrate.
Ketone bodies. This is the mechanism that essentially spawned an entire multi-billion-dollar diet industry.
It is the exact literal mechanism of the ketogenic diet.
Okay, how does that work in this context?
The fundamental design of a keto protocol, which involves the near-total eradication of dietary carbohydrates, is engineered to intentionally force the body down to step 3 and hold it there indefinitely.
Wow.
By keeping carbohydrate intake near zero, the glycogen pantry remains permanently empty. Insulin remains at rock bottom. The fat vault is thrown wide open, and the liver is forced into the continuous massive production of ketone bodies.
And the crucial evolutionary trick here is that, unlike fatty acids, these ketone bodies have the molecular clearance to cross the blood-brain barrier.
They slide right across. The brain readily accepts the ketone bodies, pulls them into its cellular machinery, and oxidizes them for fuel.
That's wild.
In a deeply fasted or ketogenic state, the brain can derive up to 75% of its total energy requirement directly from these fat-derived ketones.
It is an incredibly elegant solution to the problem of starvation. You are bypassing the empty ATM entirely and running the entire physiological infrastructure, including the central nervous system, directly off the massive long-term bank vault.
Which is an amazing survival mechanism.
But it is not a state without limits, right? There is a final step on this staircase. Step 4, the absolute bottom.
Step 4 is the territory of severe metabolic crisis.
This is the moment the body decides the house is freezing and it is time to throw the couch into the fireplace.
Precisely. If the fasting is taken to an extreme, Or if the individual possesses very low levels of body fat to begin with, the rate at which the liver can produce ketone bodies simply cannot match the energy demands of the organism.
So what happens?
The brain begins to signal an imminent catastrophic failure. The hormonal environment becomes flooded with extreme stress hormones like cortisol. The body executes its final, most destructive protocol.
Muscle breakdown.
It initiates the widespread breakdown of skeletal muscle tissue, flooding the liver with amino acids to force the gluconeogenesis we discussed earlier.
The ultimate physiological Hail Mary.
It is the biological endgame. It keeps the lights on for a few more days or weeks, but the structural degradation is profound.
When we pull all of this together and look at the entirety of the descending staircase, it completely shifts the paradigm of what weight loss actually is.
It does.
We are taught to view it as an aggressive war of attrition, just starve the body into submission. But this biological model suggests something entirely different. Safely altering your body composition is essentially a complex hormonal negotiation.
That is the perfect way to conceptualize it. It is about understanding the levers of the system.
Right.
You want to curate a lifestyle that allows you to spend sufficient time in the post-absorptive, low insulin state of step 2, allowing the body to naturally and easily access the fat vault.
And maybe occasional dips further.
Sure, you might occasionally dip into the ketone production of step 3 through strategic fasting or endurance work, but you must always provide enough nutritional support, specifically adequate dietary protein and the physical stimulus of resistance training, to ensure the central nervous system never panics and pushes you down into the destructive territory of step 4.
It is an incredible biological balancing act. Let's recap the overarching mental model we have extracted from this text today. We need to stop viewing our bodies as simple math equations and start respecting them as highly sophisticated, continuously operating chemical factories.
Right.
This factory extracts energy, meticulously accounts for every calorie, and directs the excess into 3 distinct, highly specialized facilities.
The first is the emergency pantry, the glycogen. It is fast, it is highly reactive, and it physically binds to massive amounts of water. It is the source of the rapid, deceptive fluctuations on the bathroom scale.
And the second?
The second is the deep storage vault, the adipose tissue. It is incredibly dense, highly efficient, and guarded by complex hormonal locks, but it is the true source of long-term energy.
And the third is the structural foundation, the skeletal muscle. It is the metabolic engine of the entire system, and it must be defended at all costs against the desperate process of gluconeogenesis. If we connect all of this dense biology directly back to you, the listener, navigating your own life, think about the massive psychological armor this knowledge provides.
It's empowering.
It really is. The next time you go out and enjoy a heavy, carbohydrate-rich dinner with friends on a Saturday night, and you step on the scale on Monday morning and see an incredibly frustrating 2-kilo spike, you no longer have to spiral into a state of panic.
You don't.
You don't have to adopt a punitive mindset and ruin your week with a crash diet. You now possess the biological knowledge to know that you did not spontaneously synthesize and store 2 kilos of pure body fat over the weekend.
The physiological process of lipogenesis, the creation and storage of fat, is far too slow and metabolically taxing to occur in that volume in 48 hours.
The reality is just glycogen shifting. You consumed carbohydrates, your pancreas spiked insulin, the insulin instructed your liver and muscles to rapidly refill the emergency pantry, and the glycogen molecules chemically dragged 1,500 grams of water into the cellular tissue with them.
The sponge is simply full.
It is temporary, it is harmless, and it will resolve itself as you return to your normal routine. And conversely, when you commit to a health intervention and the scale inevitably stalls after the first 2 weeks, you know it is not a failure of discipline or a broken metabolism.
Right. The water has simply been wrung out.
The illusion is over, and the real, slow, incredibly valuable work of emptying the long-term vault has finally begun. You have comprehension, not obsession.
And that deep comprehension is the only thing that sustains the long-term behavioral consistency required to actually mobilize the fat vault. You stop fighting the biology and start working with it.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final thought to ponder, something that builds on the evolutionary context we discussed regarding that incredible 154,000 calorie internal battery.
Oh, this is a great point.
Think deeply about the reality of our current existence. Our bodies evolved over millions of arduous years in brutal, unforgiving environments. The human form was meticulously engineered by natural selection to seamlessly identify, process, and permanently store massive amounts of dense energy as body fat.
It kept us alive.
It is a biological masterpiece designed to protect us from bitter winters, devastating droughts, and brutal famines. It is the singular reason our ancestors survived to pass on their genetics.
But the environment changed.
But for the vast majority of us listening today, those famines simply never arrive. The bitter winter has been canceled. We're walking around in incredible prehistoric survival vehicles, completely hardwired to anticipate starvation. But we are trying to navigate a modern environment constructed of 24-hour drive-thrus, hyper-palatable, ultra-processed snacks, and delivery apps that bring thousands of calories directly to our doors with the tap of a screen.
It's a mismatch.
The biological machine is not broken. It is doing exactly what it was brilliantly programmed to do. It just doesn't realize that the environment has fundamentally changed. So the next time you look in the mirror and feel a surge of frustration with your body or your weight, try to replace that frustration with a sense of awe.
Awe is the perfect word.
Do not hate your biology. Be amazed at the incredible, robust survival machine you are piloting. You aren't fighting a defective body. You are just learning how to properly drive a prehistoric masterpiece in the modern world.